Hello everybody. Good morning. Hope everyone's doing good. In earlier session, that is in session one, we have gone through what actually chemical safety is. That is introduction to chemical safety, how labelings of chemicals are done, what's the purpose or use of a acid hood, and how to handle acids, and what has to be done if we come in contact with acids, like what are the type of wash showers or eye washers has to be used, and these are the some of the topics that we have discussed earlier in session 1. So in today's session 2, we will look into the other safety aspects of industries. So let us start with the first topic, that is accident investigation. That means whenever an accident takes place in industry, what are the steps that has to be followed? And according to OSHA, that is Occupational Safety and Health Administration, there is usually a four-step method which everyone follows. Any investigator or who investigates the accident follows. The first step, that is preserve and document the incident scene. So, whenever an investigator starts investigating an accident that takes place in an industry, his first priority should be he should ensure that the incident or where the accident has taken place is safe and secure. So that can be done by putting a tape around the accident site and so on. Next step is you need to take photos or take the video recordings of the scene as soon as possible before it gets the equipment or materials are removed from the accident site. Next step, and he should make sure that the evidence or materials that are used as evidence should not be altered. It should be as it is. So even that can be done by cones, tapes, or gas to protect those sensitive areas. Next, he has to record items such as equipments and safety devices that were in use at the time of incident, what was the actual position of the machine, guards, controls, how was the housekeeping condition of that area, what was the weather condition, or what was the lighting or the noise level when the accident took place. So all these things has to be recorded. Next, second step is collecting information, and the information is can be collected from the workers or the people who were working when the accident took place. So, for collecting information, he can interview the witnesses. So, interviewing the witness, so the first thing he can do is he can gather what are the information is there from the during interviews, and of course interviewing has to be done individually, and whenever usually usually it is better if the interview is done where in the same location when the incident took place or the way the accident took place, so that he can jog up his memory, or he can come up he can clearly tell what actually happened, and the interview should be done in a language that is should understood by the interviewer. And of course sometimes if the language barrier or language problem is there, they can make use of a translator. So whatever the interviewing is then it will be noted down, but if recording has to be done, it has to be done after taking the permission of the witness. Next, uh, emphasize that there should be, whenever interview is being done for the workers, uh, the investigator should tell them the main purpose of this interview is to prevent any future accidents from taking place, and of course taking notes should be done as already discussed, and the question should be open ended. That means we should not come to a conclusion ourselves. It should be open ended questions, so that when we have open ended questions, uh, it won't influence the witness answer. And next is we should ask the witness to make a list of anyone that they saw in the area before the incident took place, so that the same person can be interviewed. So I even then ask the witness how, means what they think that they could have done so that this accident could have been prevented. And finally, after gathering all the witness statements, the investigator summarizes the information. Next, complete. There is something called as accident investigation form that has to be completed, and this accident investigation form have this following data. That means it has a worker characteristics such as what was his age, what's his age or gender, department, what's his job title, and so on. Whether it's a temporary or a contract worker, even all those things will be mentioned in that investigation form. Then the investigator will describe the type of injury or illness, including the parts of the body that has been affected by the accident and so on. And then he will mention the exact location of the accident, where it took place. And he'll also mention what was the condition during that accident time, what was the temperature, how was the light illumination, what was the noise level, what was the weather condition, and all those things. Then he will write a summary of events that led to the injury, what the tasks that workers were performing when the incident or accident occurred. Then finally he will write what's the root cause, what's the main cause of this accident. Next, to determine the, as I mentioned earlier slide, he will next time he will make, of course the investigator has to come up with the root cause, and let this is how, and he will determine the root cause. So once all the information has been gathered, he will start performing the root cause analysis. So there are different methods from which he can arrive, he can come to a conclusion how the accident took place, but there's a very simple and very effective way to identify the root cause of an accident, and usually we say it as a 5 ways method. So a 5 ways method means the investigator will ask 5 questions or 5 whys, and these 5 whys or 5 questions will be something like this as shown. The question will be, suppose if this is just an example, he will ask, why did the worker slip and fall? Answer would be, the oil was spilled on the plant floor. Next, immediately the next question will be, so why was the oil on the floor in the first place itself? The answer will be, the source of the oil was a nearby piece of equipment. That means the next question will be, why did the equipment leak? So the answer would be, there was a defect in its valve system. And next question, why wasn't the leak detected? Answer would have been, the system wasn't inspected regularly, so the problem was not discovered and repaired. Last question you would ask, because fifth question, why wasn't the valve system inspected? And the answer which will give us the root cause, it will be, the valve wasn't logged appropriately in the maintenance system. So that means the last answer will give us the root cause, that is the major reason why the accident took place. The reason here is that the inspection was not done properly, and whatever the defect was there, it was not written down properly in the maintenance system, in the logbook. So this is just an example how an investigator would arrive to a root cause of an accident. And of course he need not be restricted to just 5 questions, it may go beyond 5 questions or maybe even less, depends on the accident, on the type of accident. Hello everybody, good morning, hope everyone is doing good. In earlier session, that is in session 1, we have gone through what actually chemical safety is, that is introduction to chemical safety, how labelings of chemicals are done, what's the purpose or use of a acid hood, and how to handle acids, and what has to be done if we come in contact with acids, like what are the type of wash showers or eye washers has to be used. And these are some of the topics that we have discussed earlier in session 1. So in today's session 2, we will look into the other safety aspects of industries. Next topic, safety policy of the company. Of course, safety is one of the major safety and health, we can say, is one of the major important business consideration for any employer. So the employer doesn't want any employee under him to be unhealthy or working in unsafe conditions. So the company will follow all the rules and regulations usually applied by OSHA, workplace safety and health requirements, and make sure that whatever the occupational safety and the health standards are there, that almost same or exceeds or it is even better that is being followed in the industries. And to have this safety policy of the company will establish a there will be safety committee, and this safety committee will consist of management and labor representatives, and their responsibility will be to identify what are the safe or unsafe, or what we say hazards and unsafe work practices, remove the obstacles to accident prevention, and helping evaluate the company's effort to achieve an accident and injury-free workplace. Second step is collecting information, and the information can be collected from the workers or the people who were working when the accident took place. So, for collecting information, he can interview the witnesses. So, interviewing the witness, so the first thing he can do is he can gather what are the information is there from the during interviews, and of course interviewing has to be done individually, and whenever usually it is better if the interview is done whether in the same location when the incident took place or the where the accident took place, so that he can jog up his memory, or he can come up he can clearly tell what actually happened, and the interview should be done in a language that is should understood by the interviewer. And of course sometimes if the language barrier or language problem is there, they can make use of a translator. So whatever the entering is then it will be noted down, but if recording has to be done, it has to be done after taking the permission of the witness. Next, uh, emphasize that there should be whenever interview is being done for the workers, uh, the investigator should tell them the main purpose of this interview is to prevent any future accidents from taking place, and of course taking notes should be done as already. Now it's just not the employees, it's just not the employer who is responsible. There are different section of the peoples like managers, supervisors, and even the employees are responsible for the safe and healthful workplace. And that means the supervisors are make sure that they are responsible for supervising and also to provide training to workers in a safe work practices, and the supervisors should make sure that the people working him uh, follow the company's rules and regulations related to safety, and management is accountable for preventing workplace injuries and illness. And of course, the management will consider whatever the suggestions given by the employee so as to build a safer and healthier workplace. And employees are expected, that is the employees, these are the employees, they are the one who will be working, and they are expected to participate in safety and health program activities. This may include reporting any hazards or unsafe work practices and accident to supervisors immediately or safety committee representatives. And whenever they are working in hazardous condition, they should make sure that they are wearing PP equipment, and also they should participate actively and also support safety committee activities. So these are the some of the things that the employer as well as managers, supervisors, and employees should take care so as to ensure a safe and accident free environment. Next topic, checklist for LPG installation. So we are all familiar with LPG, liquid petroleum gas, and I think everyone must be knowing how to install a LPG cylinder, right? So anyhow, we'll just go through very briefly again once again just to refresh it. So first step is how to connect an LPG cylinder. So first we need to remove the safety cap. That can be done by pulling the cord and lifting the cap off the wall. Next process is to mount the regulator on the filled cylinder. So for that we can carry out this following step. First of all, we make sure that the knob of the regulator is turned off. Then we have to grip the regulator and pull back the plastic bush that has been provided. Next, we have to place the regulator vertically on the wall and press it down with a gentle swivel. Then we release the black plastic cap so that it press it down so that it stays into the seat. And now the pressure regulator is now locked. Next, suppose if you want to disconnect the cylinder or take off the regulator, the first thing we have to be done is we should put off all the flames and fires in the kitchen room. Next, we should close all the tabs of the burners. They should know that means to avoid any leakage. Then to take off the regulator, first we need to switch off the bring the knob to the switch off position of the regulator. Next, grip the regulator and pull the bush, that is pull it up and lift the regulator by giving a gentle swivel. So this makes sure that regulator will get detached or disengaged from the wall. The next step is we need to place the safety after the regulator has been removed. The safety cap that is provided with the cylinder should be placed on the wall. Now, of course, we have to press the cap such that until we hear a click sound is heard. Now the empty cylinder can be removed. Even when we are not using a gas cylinder or we have to just take it out, this is the procedure that has to be followed. Next, what has to be done when there is a leakage? Of course, when you smell a gas means because of a leakage, if you smell a gas, these are the steps that has to be followed. First of all, we should make sure that the burner knob are in close position. We should extinguish all fires and flames. Do not match light, of course. Switch off the pressure regulator by turning the knob clockwise to the off position. Open all the doors and windows, and even after doing all this, if the gas smell persists, we should call the emergency service or the gas distributor or the person who is qualified to take up such jobs. Of course, do not operate the very important. Do not operate electricity just because if gas leakages is in that area, it may cause a fire. Next, remove the cylinder to a safe and ventilated space. Do not bring any flame again or fire near the cylinder. So these are the steps that has to be followed whenever there is a leakage. Again, these are some of the operating practices while using LPG. That means how to install an LPG. So cylinder must always be kept in a vertical position, and of course it should be away from any heat source, and it should always better is kept in a ventilated area. The hot plate should always be placed on a platform above the cylinder level. And of course, when the cylinder is not being used, we should try to switch off the pressure regulator, especially at night. And we should never try to repair it or try to tamper with the cylinder or any of the related equipments. We should make sure that all the parts of the installation in good condition. Means the whatever the point maybe related with respect to the wire or the pipings that comes from the cylinder to the gas stove or any parts, it should be in good condition. And it's always safer to work in a kitchen while wearing cotton cloths, and using of dupatta, sari or cloth to handle utensils would be fire hazard. There may be chances that it may catch fire. And the best practice is that wearing a fire retardant or fire resistant apron while cooking is one of the safe practices. A few more of them are there. Never leave the hot plate unattended. Of course, that means someone should be near the when we are using the gas stove whenever burning. So because if not, sometimes the gas flame would get extinguished because of overflow cooking material or even because of the strong wind blows. This may lead to leakage. And whatever the utensils we are placing on the hot plate gas stoves, it should be make sure that it should be placed in such a manner that the handle is away from the flame. If not, it will be very difficult to touch the handle. Okay, plastic items must be kept away from the gas stove. Rubber tube, this among all the components that are present, rubber tube, this is one of the weakest link or the one that gets damaged very easily. So for that reason, it must be checked regularly, and immediately if there is a case of if there are any damages or cracks, it should be noticed, and it should be immediately replaced. It's usually mentioned that use of Suraksha. There is a LPG hose sold by LPG distributor Suraksha that should be usually recommended for most of the gas stove. and what if not that, whatever rubber stove we are using, that should be approved by ISI, and whatever the rubber tube that are being used should be replaced every 2 years. And of course, whenever the safety cap must always be put on the wall of unused cylinders, whether it's full or empty. So these are the some of the precautions established that has to be taken. Now, whatever we discussed was related to LPG. Let us see what are the precautions that has to be taken when handling CNG. So CNG are usually used in vehicles, and of course, whichever the vehicle that is using CNG should follow or should satisfy all the required conditions that are mentioned in the center motor vehicle rules. Next step is that whoever fits the CNG to vehicles, that workshop is authorized and observes safety standards and codes of practice in kit installation and commissioning. And whatever the kit and cylinder that are being fitted to the vehicles should be approved for that particular vehicle, or it should approved by the concerned authorities. And they should vehicles, of course, vehicles should also, before fitting the CNG kit, that vehicle should undergo the required pre-conversion checks thoroughly, and thorough testing should be done once the CNG has been fitted to the vehicle. They should get the installer certificate to be collected from the workshop. And of course, the CNG, whenever a CNG has been fitted to vehicle or in a biofuel mode, it has to be entered in RTO. They should get the registration certificate from RTO, and annual checking of the CNG kit and keeping the latest. So that means every year they should get the annual checking, making sure that it is working safely. And CNG cylinder has to follow the gas cylinder rules and to be hydro tested once every 3 years, keeping in mind the certificate of the same. That means every year a thorough testing has to be done, and the testing they do is hydro testing. And the certificate of CNG kit, fitness test, and also the hydro test has to be kept by the driver all the time. One we should acquire, means we should be knowing the know-how or the working with the mechanism of CNG, and what are the precautions that has to be taken while driving a CNG vehicle. In case a vehicle that has been fitted with CNG involves repair, that is like welding or heat application to any part, so the cylinders should be emptied first. And in case there is a leakage in the CNG fuel system, the vehicle shall not be parked within 6 meters of any source of ignition or fire. And of course, always refer to the supply kit manual for the troubleshooting. Means if there is any trouble, it's always preferable to refer to the kit, supplies kit that has been supplied with it. And of course, we should not try to do it ourselves. A person who is qualified for, he should be called on. And for if any emergency is there, and where we have to handle CNG leak, the users must be aware of location and operational, means where the cylinder valve, the master shutoff valve is there, and where is the burst disc in the CNG system. So to acquire ourselves or to make ourselves where this location of these are there, so we should study the system and ask the mechanic to identify this part for us. Coming on to the next topic, fire prevention and safety audit. Now, auditing we are all familiar with. Auditing is just a way of checking whether everything has been done in a proper way or not. So when we say fire safety audit, so it is just a tool to assess the fire safety standards of an organization or an occupancy. So a fire safety audit, what it will address what are the fire hazards that are associated with day-to-day activities in an industry, and it will also recommend measures to reduce the potential fire hazards. So the main purpose of the fire auditing is to assess good management practices, identify the available materials that causes for fire, identify what are the sources of ignition, and also evaluate the possibility of occurrence of fire. So I'll just, for example, whenever a fire auditing is done in the industry, they will make sure that they'll go through what are the precautions that has been taken by the employer to make the environment safety for working, what are the fire hazards, precaution steps, all those things. It will be checked during safety while doing fire auditing. Next, what has to be done when there's a leakage? Of course, when you smell a gas means because of a leakage. If you smell a gas, these are the steps that has to be followed. First of all, we should make sure that the burner knob are in close position. We should extinguish all fires and flames. Do not match light, of course. Switch off the pressure regulator by turning the knob clockwise to the off position. Open all the doors and windows. And even after doing all this, if the gas smell persists, we should call the emergency service or the gas distributor or the person who is qualified to take up such jobs. Of course, do not operate the very important. Do not operate electric switches because if gas leakages is in that area, it may cause a fire. Next, remove the cylinder to a safe and ventilated space. Do not bring any flame again or fire near the cylinder. So these are the steps that has to be followed whenever there is a leakage. A few more of them are there. Never never leave the hot plate unattended. Of course, that means once someone should be near the when we are using the gas stove whenever burning. So because if not, sometimes the gas flame would get extinguished because of overflow, cooking material, or even because of the strong wind blows. This may lead to leakage. And whatever the utensils we are placing on the hot plate gas stoves, it should be make sure that it should be placed in such a manner that the handle is away from the flame. If not, it will be very difficult to touch the handle. Okay, plastic items must be kept away from the gas stove. Rubber tube. So the fire auditing management is usually carried out these following processes. So the first step is they will go through all the fire safety management documentation for the industry. Then they will interview the management staff and other stakeholders. They will tour or site tour the inspection operation in the industry itself, where they have kept this fire safety equipments. Then they will inspect of automatic fire detection system and plant maintenance regimes. And then they will assess the occupancy level, the means of escape, assess and egress arrangement for persons with specific needs during evacuation. Suppose in case of a fire and they have to evacuate immediately, they'll check all this how the evacuation will be done. Then they will internal performance measurement, monitoring and review arrangement. So these are the following steps which are usually done by fire safety management auditing team whenever they assess any industries, whenever they audit any industries. Second step is collecting information, and the information can be collected from the workers or the people who were working when the accident took place. So for collecting information, he can interview the witnesses. So interviewing the witness, so the first thing he can do is he can gather what are the information is there from the during interviews, and of course interviewing has to be done individually. And whenever usually it is better if the interview is done whether in the same location when the incident took place or the way the accident took place, so that he can jog up his memory, or he can come up he can clearly tell what actually happened. And the interview should be done in a language that is should understood by the interviewer. And of course sometimes if the language barrier or language problem is there, they can make use of a translator. So whatever the entering is, then it will be noted down. But if recording has to be done, it has to be done after taking the permission of the witness. Next, uh, emphasize that there should be, whenever interview is being done for the workers, uh, the investigator should tell them the main purpose of this interview is to as to prevent any future accidents from taking place. And of course, taking notes should be done as already discussed. And the question should be open-ended. That means we should not come to a conclusion ourselves. It should be open-ended questions, so that when we have open-ended questions, uh, it won't influence the witness answer. And next is we should ask the witness to make a list of anyone that they saw in the area before the incident took place, so that the same person can be interviewed. So I even then ask the witness how, means what they think that they could have done so that this accident could have been prevented. And finally, after gathering all the witness statements, the investigator summarizes the information. Next step, confined. Next topic is confined space entry. So whenever we use the word confined space, that means the space is is uh, is like a confined space. It is enclosed place where the movement for anyone is restricted. There's not enough space for to move around. So a confined space we can usually find it in a chamber or a tank or a manhole or a silo, vat or a pipe or a, these are such these places are all are enclosed. And whenever we have an enclosed space, so there are chances that the supply of air will be inadequate because the space is very less, or it is likely to be reduced to inadequate for sustaining life. So for short duration of period we can stay in a confined space but not long enough. There's a risk of engulfment by the material. That means we may get engulfed by the whatever materials there is in the confined space. There are chances of dangerous gases, vapors, or fumes in such an enclosed space, in a confined space. And the person can be overcome by that, so that he may not uh, come out of it. So working in a confined space is more hazardous than working in other workplaces. The reason being, we have already discussed all these things. Uh, Working in a confined space is very hazardous. The reason being, the entrance, even the exist of confined space. If something does happen to the person working in confined space, it might not allow whoever trying to save him or take him out of the confined space to evacuate effectively. He won't be able to take him out or evacuate. And also if the person want to rescue himself, that is self rescue, is also very difficult. Rescue of the victim is more difficult. The interior configuration of a confined space often restrict the movement of people or equipment within it. Yes, we agree that natural ventilation is very difficult, often not sufficient to maintain breathable quality air, because the interior configuration of the confined spaces does not allow air movement. Because as the space is very less, the movement of air will be uh, very difficult. Because of that, natural ventilation is not possible. And in a confined space, the conditions can change very quickly. Okay, the person who is entering a confined space may feel safe at the beginning, but that situation can change very quickly. And even the space that is outside the confined space can impact on the condition inside the confined space and vice versa. And work activities may introduce hazards that were not present initially. As before entering a confined space, the person may feel there's no hazard or there's no risk in this. But once he enters a confined space, that as mentioned earlier, the situations can change quickly and hazards may come into picture. Let us see the types of hazards, hazards in confined spaces. Of course, there are many hazards that can exist in confined space. Some of the hazards that can occur in actual hazards that are that can present in non-confined space can also occur in confined spaces. That one is the most dangerous hazard is that is the atmosphere contained within them. The atmosphere condition contained within the confined space. The atmosphere that is present inside a confined space will vary depending upon the type of space, the work that is being done inside, and what was previously contained or stored in that confined space. However, as mentioned, there are many hazards, but the most common atmospheric hazards that are found in a confined space can be broadly classified into three. That is suffocation. Suffocation hazard. That means in a confined space there will be lack of oxygen because that results in asphyxiation due to oxygen deficiency. A person can lose his consciousness. Next hazard may be fire and explosion hazards. And because the space is confined and if any flammable gases or any flammable material is there, it may catch fire. Then poisoning, because in a confined space the movement of air is very difficult, and if any toxic gases or vapors are there, it may lead to poisoning of that person. Next topic, risk assessment. So whenever we say risk assessment, it describes the process where we will try to identify the hazards and what are the risk factors that are the potential to cause harm. That means we'll assess the situation. That is what risk assessment is. That means before undertaking any work or any operation, we try to assess the risk. So whenever we assess the risk, we'll try to identify what are the hazards or risk factors is there in this particular operation or process which may cause harm to us. Next, we'll analyze and evaluate the risk that is associated with that hazard. And after identifying then analyzing, we'll try to find a solution so that that hazard can be eliminated or controlled. We usually control the hazard when it is not possible to eliminate it. So that is what risk assessment is. So basically we can say that a risk assessment is a thorough look at the workplace to identify these things, these situations or processes that may cause harm, particularly to people. Now after identifying is made, after identifying the risk, we analyze it and evaluate how likely and severely the risk is. Next, after evaluating, the next step would be what measures can be taken to effectively eliminate or control the harm from happening. So this is the basic concept of risk assessment. Of course, this is risk assessment is one of the important, or you can say the integral part of an occupation health and safety management plan. Risk assessment helps to create awareness of what are the risks and hazards. It helps in identifying who are at risk, whether it is employee or the cleaner, visitors, contractors, public, or even the we can say machineries which may get damaged. Determine whether a control program is required for a particular hazard, determining if existing control measures are adequate or if more should be done. It helps preventing injuries or illness, especially when done near the design or planning stage itself. It will prioritize hazards and control measures. Prioritize in the sense it will give a rating which is higher priority, we should attend to immediately, and so on. And it also helps in meet the legal requirements wherever applicable. And risk assessment should usually done by a competent person or a team who have good working knowledge of the situation that is being studied. That means they should have the experience where they have been already exposed. Those people or the team should only do the risk assessment. And generally, of course, the main purpose of doing a risk assessment is to identify the hazards. Also, what what determine it helps in determining the what type of harm or injury it can or illness it can cause and what are its severity. So these are some of things they have mentioned. Uh, it will consider normal operation situations as well as non-standard events such as maintenance, shutdown, all those things. It will try to review all the available health safety information such as SD safety data sheet from all the manufacturing literature and so on. Next step, confined. Next topic is confined space entry. So whenever we use the word confined space, that means the space is is uh, is like a confined space. It is enclosed place where the movement for anyone is restricted. There's not enough space for to move around. So a confined space we can usually find it in a chamber or a tank or a manhole or a silo, vat or a pipe or a, these are such these places are all are enclosed, and whenever we have an enclosed space, so there are chances that the supply of air will be inadequate because the space is very less, or it is likely to be reduced to inadequate for sustaining life. So for short duration of period we can stay in a confined space but not long enough. There's a risk of engulfment by the material. That means we second step is collecting information, and the information is can be collected from the workers or the people who were working when the accident took place. So for collecting information, he can interview the witnesses. So interviewing the witness, so the first thing he can do is he can gather what are the information is there from the during interviews, and of course interviewing has to be done individually, and whenever usually it is better if the interview is done whether in the same location when the incident took place or the way the accident took place, so that he can jog up his memory, or he can come up he can clearly tell what actually happened. And the interview should be done in a language that is should understood by the